I am not afraid. The story of John.W. Vinson, Christian martyr in China, written by E.H. Hamilton. Audiobook produced by scrollreader.com. What would you do if you were tied up by a gang of violent bandits and one of them came over, pointed a pistol at your head and said, "I'm going to kill you. Aren't you afraid?" That wasn't just a theoretical question for Jack Vinson. It was a real moment in North Jiangsu, China, on November 2nd, 1931. What he did and the answer he gave has inspired and strengthened believers around the world. His response placed him in the company of Queen Esther, "If I perish, I perish." Nehemiah, "Should someone like me run away?" Paul, "Why are you weeping and breaking my heart? I am ready not only to be imprisoned, but to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." Martin Luther, "Even if every tile on every roof in Worms were a devil, I would still go." David Livingstone, "Why should I fear? No, I will take my bearings tonight, even if it's my last." Jack Vinson looked straight at his captor and calmly said,
"No, I am not afraid. If you kill me, I will go straight to heaven."
Chapter 1. A Chosen Instrument. Who was Jack Vinson? He was a small man, familiar with sickness and pain, and well acquainted with sorrow, but he knew God so well that he could say with Paul, "No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." John Walker Vinson was born in Winnsboro, South Carolina, on December 28, 1880. When he was still a young boy, his family moved to Sherman, Texas, and built a home near Austin College. His parents were faithful and active members of the Presbyterian Church. For many years, his father, an honored elder, led a mission Sunday school, and young John helped him. Living near the Austin College campus, John was influenced early by deeply committed Christian students, some of whom later became well-known missionaries. Will Junkin and Adam Rice to China, Alva Hardy to Brazil, and Mott Martin to Africa. It's no surprise that Vinson became a student volunteer while at Austin College and served in a mission connected to the First Presbyterian Church in Sherman. He was also active in a literary society and served as president of the YMCA in his senior year. John graduated second in his class in 1903 and entered Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary that fall. Soon after he arrived, the student body was shaken by news from Africa. The mission steamer Lapsley had sunk in the Belgian Congo in November 1903. Henry Slaymaker, a strong swimmer, had drowned, while Mott Martin, who couldn't swim, had survived. Deeply moved, John immediately volunteered to become a missionary to Africa. However, 3 years later, when he finished seminary, the need in China had become urgent. The Executive Committee of Foreign Missions urged him to go there instead, and he agreed. He sailed for China and arrived on February 4, 1907, assigned to work in Sutsen, North Jiangsu. The trip by Chinese boats along the Grand Canal from Xinjiang to Sutsen was bitterly cold, but he arrived safely and began learning the language. At that time, a young American woman was also living in Sutsen, Miss Jeannie DeForest Junkin, the younger sister of Dr. Will Junkin. John quickly fell in love, but was too shy to express it directly. Evening after evening he would visit Dr. Bradley's home to see Jeannie, then return to his own house and write her love letters. At last, the shy but brave John found the courage to ask her to marry him. They were wed in April 1908, and the following year they moved together from Sutsen to Haichao. Not long after their marriage, John Vinson developed a chronic illness that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Jeannie, too, suffered from one illness after another. For many years their lives were marked by sickness, suffering, and sorrow, until Jeannie was joyfully released in death in 1923, and John followed in glory in 1931. As we read their story, largely drawn from Jeannie's letters over the years, we are reminded of Paul and of what God said to Ananias in Damascus. "Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel, for I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name." Chapter 2. Faith Against Suffering. In early January 1917, Mr. Vinson was confined to his room for 2.5 months. His condition worsened seriously in mid-March, and he had to be taken to Shanghai for treatment and possibly surgery. Saying he was taken from Haichao to Shanghai sounds simple, but only someone who has traveled such a path with a sick loved one can understand what that involved. Mrs. Vinson described the journey in detail. Because her husband was very weak, he had to be carried on a cot from Haichao to Shinpu, a port 4 miles away where a small Japanese steamer waited to sail for Tsingtao. Although the captain was told clearly that Mr. Vinson's illness was not contagious, he still refused to let him board, fearing the ship might be quarantined upon arrival in Tsingtao. So Mrs. Vinson and Dr. Morgan had to take him by a slow route, via the Salt Canal and the so-called Grand Canal. They found a small boat with a junk sail and began their journey along the Salt Canal, traveling slowly until nightfall, when they reached a rough lock. The next morning, after passing through the lock, they had to transfer to 2 small boats, which Mrs. Vinson described as very small, crowded, dirty things. This gentle phrase masked the harsh reality. The boats were filthy and crawling with biting insects hiding in every crack. They endured these conditions all day, finally reaching Qingqiangpu by evening, where they were welcomed into a missionary home for a night of much-needed rest. The next morning, they learned that the launch they had planned to take to Qingqiang couldn't run. The water level in the canal was too low. Once again, they were forced to travel by small sailboat, which took 3 days instead of 1 to reach Qingqiang. When they finally arrived, they rushed to the train station, only to see the express train to Shanghai pulling away. They had to wait another 4 hours for the next train. They traveled first class, hoping there would be space for Mr. Vinson to lie down, but he had to endure the 6-hour journey sitting upright. They reached Shanghai late at night, and it wasn't until the following day, 1 full week after leaving Haichao, that they were able to admit him to the Red Cross hospital. The next 2 years were marked by repeated and serious flare-ups of his illness, bringing suffering and constant concern. Finally, in the fall of 1919, an emergency furlough was necessary. Yet neither John nor Jeannie ever complained or spoke bitterly. In a letter written aboard the SS Empress of Asia in October 1919, Jeannie wrote,
"Mr. Vinson suffers constantly and gets little good out of his food, as he loses 2 out of 3 meals. But one would never know from him anything about it, for he grits his teeth and goes about as usual, ready for a joke with anyone."
No one would have guessed she was also sick at the time. She only mentioned,
"I had been feeling so no account all summer. I had not touched the children's clothes."
when she received a telegram to meet her husband in Shanghai for the urgent journey to America. She had just 2 days to pack everything. She explained it simply.
"I packed in 2 days. One was Sunday, and I went to 3 Chinese services, teaching at the Sunday school."
Returning to dear old China, as they fondly called it, was a time of great joy. Friends welcomed them warmly in Shanghai. Since the Grand Canal was too low for travel, they stayed 12 days with friends in Suzhou, waiting for the water to rise. Even the journey on the Salt Canal went well.
"We were fortunate,"
Jeannie wrote,
"to get the most roomy and comfortable boats we've ever had on the Salt Canal. for those boats usually leak on 6 sides and don't allow you to stand upright. We got home Saturday morning, so thankful and happy. The entire 350-mile trip from Suzhou took 13 days. Pretty good, considering the headwinds.
A wonderful welcome awaited them from fellow missionaries and Chinese believers in Haichao. Don't think that their frequent illnesses meant the Vinsons didn't work hard. When Jack was well enough, he traveled through the countryside, visiting small churches, preaching, and teaching new believers preparing for church membership. When too weak to travel, he still carried a full load in the station, evangelizing in the city and hospital, keeping the accounts, and helping the overworked Dr. Morgan in every way he could. At one point, he also served as principal of the boys' school. Mrs. Vinson was just as busy as her husband. Each morning from 8:15 a.m. to 1 p.m., she taught the missionary children, 4 pupils across 3 grades. After only a half-hour rest following lunch, she spent the afternoons, from 3 o'clock to 6 p.m. or later, working among Chinese women in the city.
I've about 20 girls and women I try to teach once a week,
She wrote.
Some are gathered in groups, but altogether there are at least 10 separate visits each week, besides the Christian women's class of 20 or more on Wednesday. Then there are always 2 or 3 services on Sunday.
She also supervised the half-trained Bible women doing ministry in the countryside. At one point, when Mrs. Rice was away, Mrs. Vinson stepped in as the evangelistic worker among the women in the hospital.
I am perfectly fascinated with this work,
She wrote.
You cannot imagine the sweetness of telling of Christ to people who have never heard even once, to whom it is such a beautiful, wonderful story. Some of them seem to accept it so simply, and all of them are so pitiful.
At night, she turned her attention to her children, telling them Bible stories before tucking them into bed. Only then did she sit down to her correspondence. It was a demanding schedule for someone who was herself fighting a slow, losing battle with illness. Chapter 3. How Loss Deepened the Vinsons' Ministry. Jack and Jeannie Vinson were called not only to a life of service, but also to a life of suffering, and they bore both with quiet strength. Of their 6 children, only 3 lived to adulthood. 2 baby boys, William and Dickie, died in infancy.
We can only be quiet before our Maker,
Jeannie wrote,
and trust him to do with us and ours what he will, knowing that he cannot make any mistake and loves us and the precious little ones better than we can conceive. I pray that this may in some way be used to make us more fruitful here in this place full of those who sorrow, especially for their babies, with no hope whatever.
Years later, their oldest son, Eben, fell ill with a mysterious condition and after many months of suffering, died while still in high school. But the deepest sorrow Jack ever faced was watching his beloved Jeannie slowly waste away after giving birth to their long-hoped-for daughter, also named Jeannie. Week by week, she grew thinner and weaker until at last, in desperation, Jack took her on a long journey to Peking. There, at the Rockefeller Hospital, she passed into the presence of her Lord on March 25, 1923. Jack wrote to his brothers and sisters,
On April 7th, exactly 15 years to the day after she left Sutsien for Suzhou to prepare for our wedding, we laid her to rest in the little cemetery here on our compound. She sleeps almost between our 2 little boys, William and Dick. We had a beautiful service in both English and Chinese, led by Mr. Grafton and Mr. Feng. Many of the Christian women gathered at the grave had first heard the gospel from her lips and had given their hearts to Jesus because of her witness. Some of those she led to Christ had already gone before her and were waiting to welcome her in the glory land. One young girl she loved dearly died just 2 days after we left for Peking. We're trying not to look at her death with gloom. I've talked about it with the boys, and they understand well. We speak of Mother as if she has just slipped into the next room. Truly, I believe she is near us, for I cannot think of heaven as far away. Still, the path is lonely. I miss her at every turn, her love, her counsel. But most of all, I miss caring for her. I had been her nurse for many months. I take comfort in thinking that she is now happy in the homeland, free from all pain and suffering. The children will miss her gentle love and care. She was such a tender mother to her boys. Her heart's longing was for a little daughter. God gave her one of the dearest and most precious little girls, but that baby will never know her mother's love. I will carry on with the children as best I can. You knew her worth as a sister, how dear and precious she was. But she was even dearer and more precious as a wife and mother. I need your prayers, and much of God's sustaining grace, and the gentle comfort of his love. I pray that I can bear the cross he has laid upon me with a brave heart and an undismayed spirit. I have my children to love and to train for his service. Write to me when you can. I need your words of love and comfort.
About 3 weeks after the quiet funeral, Mrs. Vinson's Chinese friends held a memorial service to honor her memory. More than 1,000 people attended. Civil and military officials came and brought tributes for this noble woman. One of Haichau's most respected citizens, though not a Christian himself, had studied English with Mr. Vinson for over a year. He gave a beautiful speech, speaking of her selfless life and her love for Chinese girls and women. He clearly stated that only Christianity could put such love in a person's heart. He urged everyone there to follow her example by living for others and reminded them that her life was one of service and devotion to Jesus Christ. Many others, both Christians and non-Christians, also gave moving tributes. As Mr. Vinson later wrote,
The beautiful verse in Hebrews, she being dead, yet speaketh, kept going through my mind during the entire service. God used her death in a powerful way to bring more people to hear the gospel at one time than ever before here in Haichau.
Chapter 4. Quiet Resilience. No one who met Jack Vinson saw the twinkle in his eye or heard his cheerful laugh as he joked with a fellow missionary or Chinese friend would have guessed that he had lived for years with constant sickness, deep sorrow, and physical pain. I remember clearly a meeting of the North Kiangsu Mission held in Haichau in the fall of 1925. Uncle Jack, as the younger missionaries fondly called him, was in charge of the kitchen. With great enthusiasm, he prepared one delicious meal after another, helped by his Chinese cook, Chu Si-fu, to feed about 50 missionary guests. When we cheered for head chef Vinson, his face lit up with joy. Jack was also close friends with General Pei Pao-shan, the top military leader in the Haichau area. Back during the 1911 revolution, General Pei had come to Jack and asked him to cut off his queue, a bold sign of reform. The general was fond of American food. Whenever he had a craving for a Vinson-style dinner, he would ask the local postmaster, Mr. Shao, to hint that a foreign-style meal would be most welcome. Mr. Shao would often say, "General Pei likes catsup," a phrase that became a running joke among missionaries in the years that followed. In return for his friendship with Jack, the general once hosted the entire North Kiangsu mission team at a grand Chinese banquet. In March 1927, when communist soldiers, posing as part of General Chiang Kai-shek's army, rebelled, they attacked mission stations throughout China. Several missionaries were killed in Nanking, and all missionaries in North Kiangsu were forced to flee. When these troops reached Haichau, they looted and destroyed nearly all the missionary homes and buildings. 2 years later, Mr. Vinson returned alone to Haichau from America, having left his 3 children, Jack, Chal, and little Jean, with their aunt in Lexington, Virginia. With all his loved ones gone and his mission station in ruins, he wrote,
Yesterday morning, before Sunday school, I walked down to the riverside to look at the destruction the soldiers had caused to our mission property 2 years ago. As I stood there, taking in the wreckage of what were once our beautiful and comfortable homes, I thought of Nehemiah. I could easily feel what must have stirred in his heart as he rode around the ruined city of Jerusalem at night, and viewed the walls which were broken down, and the gates thereof burned with fire. As I remembered the good times and cherished moments of the past, something else caught my eye, something that stirred hope for the future. All the fruit trees we had planted, and many of the shade trees, precious treasures in this treeless land, had been cut down, taken away, and burned for firewood. But several of the old stumps were sending up new shoots. That sight was full of meaning for me, so full of promise, like a quiet prophecy of fruit and shade in days yet to come. From that desolate compound by the river, I made my way to the West Gate Chapel. It was time for Sunday school and the morning worship service. How I wish each of you could have shared those next 2 hours with me. I wish I could help you feel just how real and warm the welcome was. The joyful, loving greeting from my Chinese Christian friends when I stepped into the chapel. There were tears in many eyes, but behind the tears were smiles, gentle, heartfelt, and full of love. I wonder if you can imagine the emotions that filled my heart as I sat and listened to the Sunday school class reading the lesson aloud in Chinese. Was it mere coincidence that on this first Sunday morning back in Haichao, with the memory of the destruction at the riverside still vivid, the lesson was Isaiah 40 verses 1 to 11. Comfort ye, my people, says your God. Perhaps it was coincidence, but to me it was one of those loving, providential touches of the Lord. The third verse rang in my ears like a personal call from God. Prepare ye in the wilderness, here in Haichao, where my home lies in ruins, the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert, the darkened, ignorant hearts of those around me, a highway for our God. Is it any wonder that the image of our ruined homes passed again before my eyes as they continued reading? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God shall stand forever. That truth struck me deeply, and it has lingered in my heart like a gentle song. The things we have lost, our homes, our belongings, were all temporary, material things. But the invisible, the spiritual, the eternal things, the love, loyalty, and devotion of our true Chinese Christian friends, have only grown stronger through our suffering. So the service ended, and I left with tears in my eyes. But behind the tears, a smile. And in my heart was a prayer that in the rebuilding of both visible and invisible things, we may be given the vision, courage, patience, and determination of Nehemiah, that we may labor with faith, trust, and a hopeful spirit, as he did.
Chapter 5. Faces of Suffering. Jack Vinson cared deeply about every aspect of the mission station, especially the people. He was just as invested in the work of the hospital as if he had been a trained medical doctor himself. While handling hospital accounts and assisting Dr. Morgan, he paid close attention to the patients, their illnesses, and their treatments. He wrote,
So many and so varied are the cases we see daily in our clinic that even a partial report would fill a thick issue of the medical journal. I was in the clinic today. Here are just a few of the cases. This man has a tubercular spine. That one is infected with hookworm. This young man, with blood running down his face, just had a fight with his brother. His head met the business end of a butcher's cleaver. The old man with misery in his eyes has a carbuncle between his shoulders. Not one of those small ones you see back home, but a massive one covering 25 to 30 square inches. Here's a tiny baby with a huge abscess on one side of his head. 2 men near the door have badly infected hands. Their white blood cells are fighting streptococci and pus is everywhere. 1 man has leprosy. The one next to him has cancer on his face. Those 2 soldiers are suffering from syphilis. That boy has scabby head. Several have malaria. 5 are battling Kala Azar. That middle-aged man has trachoma and is nearly blind. The man walking out has dropsy. The nurse just removed about a gallon of fluid from his abdomen. And that boy there has a large bladder stone. There were 72 patients in the clinic today. The cases I mentioned are just examples. Several will go to the operating room tomorrow afternoon. 3 or 4 operations in one afternoon, after a full morning in the clinic, make for a very long day for our one doctor-surgeon. But his work doesn't end there. After supper, he still has to examine around 75 inpatients, and he counts it a fortune at night if he isn't called out of bed to help bring a child into the world, or to ease the pain of someone in critical condition.
He continued saying,
Dr. Morgan's name would be listed high among the greats of the medical profession in any country. But here, his name is written in the hearts of nearly 2 million Chinese. Men instinctively trust him. Women and children love him. He is more than just an excellent doctor. He is a man of character. Always gentle, always thoughtful, always patient and kind. He is faithfully at his post, day and night. I have never once known him to refuse a call, no matter how tired he was or how bad the weather.
Mr. Vinson continues his tribute to the beloved physician.
One loves to look into our doctor's face. Those lines and tiny seams are not the marks of old age. They've been etched there by a loving heart, weighed down with anxious care for the health and well-being of all of us here on the station. I know, because his concern for me and my family has written some of the deepest ones. He has brought our children into the world, and with reverence and tenderness he has closed the eyes of our loved ones in death. Each experience has left its trace on his face. To those of us who know him, those lines spell love.
Chapter 6. Fleas and First Fruits. Jack Vinson's happiest and most fruitful work was as a traveling country evangelist. Let this pastor, prophet, and poet speak in his own words about those trips. Note: Yang was the small town where he would later be captured by bandits. Mr. Liu Yisheng was the evangelist who was with him when he was taken. He writes,
June 5th, 1929. In addition to keeping the hospital accounts, I've been given the privilege of overseeing Mr. Grafton's evangelistic work while he is away on furlough. I've just returned from a 2-week visit to 6 of the outstations in his district. The warm, hearty welcome, the kindness, generosity, and hospitality shown to me by the Christians and inquirers in Yang will always remain one of the sweetest memories of my life. Several came to visit soon after I arrived. One brought a chicken, another some eggs, others brought vegetables of all sorts to meet my physical needs. I spent 6 days in close, intimate fellowship with our evangelist, Mr. Liu Yisheng. He has the same love for his brothers that Paul had, and a similar zeal for the Lord. He's only been in Yang for 3 years, but I was struck by the deep respect and affection that people of all classes have for him. As the result of Mr. Liu's loving labor, 71 people came forward for examination, and 8 of them were received into the church on profession of faith in Jesus Christ. These new believers came from all walks of life: merchants, prosperous farmers, students, and teachers, ranging from the most uneducated to the town's most respected scholar, Mr. Chao Shi-chin. Few of them knew anything about theology, but their simple trust in Jesus as the Savior of mankind was beautiful to witness. I asked Mr. Chao, the Confucian scholar, why he wanted to become a Christian. He replied, "I am seeking the way to virtue and righteousness. Unless I can gain these, I am lost. This gospel is the only salvation for my country." On this visit, I examined 128 inquirers, and 28 were received into church membership.
But not all was food, faith, and fellowship. Jack also had very personal encounters with fleas. In one letter, he devotes an entire paragraph to those persistent pests.
May brings its challenges, chief among them insects. Fleas are especially numerous and especially lively in every country village. Some are wanderers, strays you might say, absent without leave. yet most have been driven from their usual homes by hard economic times. Their crowded tenements on water buffaloes, pigs, dogs, and cats can't hold them anymore. I used to think a flea had only 6 legs, and that it travelled in long, graceful hops like a kangaroo. But after 4 weeks of close personal contact, I'm now convinced a flea has at least 16 legs, each ending in 2 hairy, tickling feet. They get especially active at night, dragging all 16 feet up and down your spine in a slow, lazy, maddening way, until sleep is gone and slumber leaves your eyes. Turning your pajamas inside out doesn't help. There are always more fleas on the outside than there were on the inside. And so, the last state of that man is worse than the first.
In a letter dated December 4th, 1929, describing 4 weeks of travel as winter set in, Jack spoke of cold, comfortless days out in the country. But even the chill could not dampen his spirit, for he opened the letter with joyful words,
"My heart is bubbling over today, so why not pour it out to you who love me and are praying for my work? If there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repenteth, why shouldn't we rejoice together over the 46 I have just baptized during the autumn rounds at 8 outstations in this great mission field?"
That journey once again included John.W. From there, he wrote,
"What a wonderful day this has been. 67 examined over the past 3 days, 18 baptized. What joy to break to them the bread and to share the cup of their first Lord's Supper. Over these past weeks and months, I've been witnessing souls in the very process of being born again. Christ's image is being shaped so clearly in their hearts that it shines out from their faces and shows itself in the fruitfulness of changed lives. I baptized Old Man Wang today. Since the love of Jesus entered his heart, his face has been radiant with joy. He was once in darkness, but the Lord has brought him into his glorious light. He came to his baptism not only bringing his own soul as a first-fruits offering to the Saviour who redeemed him, but carrying other sheaves as well. His younger brother, his wife, and 6 neighbours, whom he has personally been teaching, were also brought to Christ through him, and were baptized alongside him. He is truly a living epistle, known and read of all men in the village where he lives.
In another letter, after describing the many old, uneducated women in Xiangshui-ku who were turning from deep idolatry and beginning to seek after the true God, Jack wrote,
"They have lost faith in the power of their fathers' gods, gods who could not heal their sicknesses, calm their fears, or give them peace. Now they are coming to Jesus, seeking. Their knowledge is still incomplete, their faith is only in the early light of dawn. But in their ignorance, with a faith that gropes blindly in the twilight, some have touched but the hem of his garment. And behold, they have been made whole, and have found the peace that passeth knowledge. They've shared their simple testimonies with others, and now the women, with all their heartaches, griefs, sorrows, and burdens of body and soul, are turning from the gods of their ancestors, and coming to the Saviour of mankind. You who live in the blessed homeland, thank God that you know him, and lift up a prayer for these ones still in darkness, that they too may find Jesus, the way to life."
Chapter 7. Abduction by Bandits. Then came that fateful Halloween, 1931, tragic from man's perspective, yet appointed in the loving purpose of God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Some days earlier, Jack Vinson had returned to the country town he dearly loved, Yangjiaji. That past summer, his chronic illness had returned sharply, requiring hospitalization and another surgery in Shanghai. After a period of recovery, he announced that he would go again to the countryside. The younger missionaries were concerned. "Uncle Jack," they said, "you're not strong enough yet to go." One even offered to take his place. But there was quiet resolve in Jack's face as he replied, "I must go. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to witness, and I must go while I can." Not even his beloved physician could persuade him to stay back. In his heart was something of the same spirit as his master, who once said, "I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work." So, on that Halloween night, he was staying in a small room at the Christian chapel in Yangjiaji. Evangelist Lu and Mr. Hu, his trusted co-workers, were with him, helping in the evangelistic meetings. That evening, the small group of Christian leaders had gathered, discussing the plans for the next day, Sunday, and then went to bed. Though bandits were known to roam the surrounding countryside, the town itself felt safe. Within its walls were 100 armed militiamen standing guard. There was no fear. There was a dangerous overconfidence among the militiamen. Not long before, when bandits had attacked a nearby village, the defenders of Yangjiaji had marched out, soundly defeated them, and returned victorious, having killed or wounded several. What they didn't realize was that those bandits had not forgotten. They had been harboring revenge, silently gathering strength. They merged with other gangs, growing into a force of 600 or 700 men, and plotted a surprise attack to take vengeance on Yangjiaji. They even had help from 1 or 2 traitors inside the town who were secretly linked to the bandit underground. That bandit army struck while the town slept. Before most of the militia could even wake, the bandits were already in the streets, looting, burning, killing. The nightmare continued through the night and all through the next day. Several bandits entered the chapel compound. They looted the few belongings of Evangelist Lu and the other Chinese co-workers and rifled through Mr. Vinson's suitcase. One of them took his overcoat. Then they left. But shortly after, a second group arrived. When one bandit spotted the American missionary, he barked, "Laiba, come!" When Mr. Vinson hesitated, several armed bandits grabbed him. They tied his hands with rope and led him away in his pajamas, not even allowing him time to dress. He was taken to a filthy little inn and held as a prisoner. The innkeeper, moved with compassion for the frail man, standing barefoot, teeth chattering from the cold, offered his only spare clothing, a long padded robe along with Chinese cloth shoes and socks. In that quiet act of mercy, it was clear that God was indeed in the shadow, keeping watch above his own. All day long, Jack remained in that inn, along with many other Chinese prisoners who had been rounded up. One of them later reported the terror of that day, the way the bandits shouted threats against the American pastor. "Let's kill him! Let's cut out his tongue!" Then, just before nightfall, the bandits finally pulled out of Yangjiaji, taking with them about 150 men, women, and children as hostages to be held for ransom, and their most valuable captive of all, the American missionary. Chapter 8. Martyr at Yangjiaji. When word reached Haichao that Yangjiaji had fallen and Jack Vinson was in the hands of bandits, the only 2 other missionaries assigned to the station, E.S. Curry and W.C. McLaughlin, were both 100 miles away at a meeting in Xinqiangpu. Mrs. McLaughlin immediately sent telegrams to them and to the American Consul General in Nanking. She and Mrs. Curry also went straight to military headquarters in Haichao, pleading urgently for action. Soon, a force of government soldiers was dispatched in pursuit of the bandits. By Tuesday, they caught up with them. The bandits had taken refuge inside the fortified village of Longwang-dang, where they dug in. The government troops surrounded the village and laid siege. Realizing the danger, the bandit chief approached Mr. Vinson and asked,
"Do you want to go free?"
"Certainly,"
Jack replied.
"All right,"
said the bandit.
"If you will write a letter to the Army General and persuade him to withdraw his troops. I'll let you go free.
Will you also release these Chinese captives you're holding?
The missionary asked.
Certainly not,
The bandit snapped.
Then neither will I go free,
said Mr. Vinson. Furious, the bandit chief raged and threatened, but the frail man before him stood firm and unshaken. That afternoon, the bandits tried to fight their way out, but the army drove them back with heavy losses. That night, under cover of darkness, they made another desperate attempt to escape. Some succeeded. Many were killed. Of the 150 captives, most were able to flee in the chaos. But a few, Jack Vinson among them, were still held. When Jack, weakened by illness, could no longer keep up with the fleeing bandits, they shot him in the back. Then they beheaded him. His body was discovered by a former student, Mr. Wu Kejiao, who had heard that his old schoolmaster had been taken by bandits and was courageously searching the countryside in hopes of finding him. When he came upon the body, he gently laid it in an abandoned shed. He was on his way to buy a coffin when he encountered Mr. Curry and a Chinese evangelist, who were also out searching for their beloved colleague. In death, Jack Vinson preached to more people than he had ever reached at one time in life. The funeral was held inside the ruined mission compound where he had lived, because the small cemetery was there. Before the service, conducted in English by Mr. Curry and in Chinese by Mr. McLaughlin, some Chinese asked Mrs. McLaughlin if the gates should be closed to keep out the rabble. "Indeed, no," she answered. "Open them wide, that all may come in and see what has happened and hear the word and message, along with our songs of victory around the open grave." Among the guests were non-Christian officials, and they were profoundly struck by the fact that this was a man who could have saved himself, but chose not to. Mr. McLaughlin explained that Jack had simply followed his master, just as the chief priests and scribes once said of Jesus, mocking him among themselves, "He saved others, but he could not save himself." That was because Christ chose not to, for the sake of saving our souls. In the same way, Jack could have been released. Mrs. McLaughlin added, "A hushed stillness fell over the hundreds of Chinese gathered there, not as a crowd of onlookers, but as people standing in reverent awe." The news of their father's tragic death came as a heavy blow to the three children in Lexington, Virginia. Little Jean, just 9 years old, at first reacted in anguish, praying, "Lord, kill the old bandits that killed my daddy." But later, her Aunt Lila overheard her praying a different prayer, asking the Lord to forgive the bandits who had taken her father's life. Jack and Chow, both in high school, felt a clear call from God through their father's martyrdom. Chow resolved to become a medical doctor, and Jack to follow in his father's footsteps as an evangelistic missionary. Together they prayed that one day they might bring Christ, and through him, forgiveness and eternal life, to the very bandits who had murdered their father. Both brothers did become missionaries to China, but when World War II broke out, they and their wives were imprisoned in a Japanese concentration camp, where they nearly starved. After the war, they returned to China again, but were later forced back to the United States due to illness in their families. Little Jean, now grown, also followed the path of service. With her husband, the Reverend Bob Urquhart, she became a Presbyterian, USA missionary to Korea. Chapter 9. Afraid? Of what? A little girl, the daughter of a Chinese evangelist, had been one of the captives taken by the bandits. Afterward, she told how she had seen a bandit trying to frighten Mr. Vinson. She saw the man raise a gun to the missionary's head and threaten him.
"Aren't you afraid?"
"No, I am not afraid,"
came the calm reply. Again the threat came.
"I'm going to kill you." Aren't you afraid?
Once more, the man of God answered firmly,
No, I am not afraid. If you kill me, I will go right to heaven.
Afraid of what? To feel the Spirit's glad release, to pass from pain to perfect peace, the strife and strain of life to cease. Afraid of that. Afraid of what? Afraid to see the Savior's face, to hear his welcome and to trace the glory gleam from wounds of grace. Afraid of that. Across a pierced heart, darkness light, oh heaven's art, a wound of his that counterpart, afraid of afraid of what? To enter into heaven's rest, and yet to serve the Master blessed, from service good to service best, afraid of afraid of what? To do by death what life could not, baptized with blood, a stony plot, till soul shall blossom from the spot, afraid of that.
This poem was written by E.H. Hamilton, a colleague of Jack Vinson. It later came into the hands of John and Betty Stam. When they, too, faced martyrdom at the hands of Red soldiers in Anhui Province, China, John wrote to his father just before their capture, "We're now in dangerous territory, but we're not afraid. The enclosed poem exactly expresses our feelings." The poem enclosed was, afraid? Of what? As the Apostle Paul encourages us in Philippians 1:28 to not be frightened in anything by your adversaries, this is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. Let us therefore stand firm, knowing that our courage in the face of opposition proclaims both the judgment that awaits our foes and the victory of our souls through Christ. Our fearless faith in Christ is a bold signal to the lost of the truth of our message. We would encourage you to also listen to The Triumph of John and Betty Stam, which is also on scrollreader.com.